Well, sadly, we're out of time and we've recorded too much, and it's going to be a nice job to turn this into a show that has some consistency to it.
Or nice.
Welcome to the SMB Community Podcast with your hosts, Amy Babinchek, James Kernan, Amy Luby, and Karl Palachuk. Produced by and for the Small Biz Thoughts technology community. We're dedicated to making every IT professional a successful IT professional.
Welcome, everybody, to the SMB Community Podcast. We have a full house today. Amy B., Amy L., James, and this is Karl, and we are very happy to be here. And this show is to air February 30th, so I'm not sure how that works. So Amy Babinchek was telling us, so your electricity is out because of an ice storm in Michigan. I'm in Southern California, where it's a very, very chilly 50 degrees and the wind is blowing and it's just horrible. And so I'm surviving. I'm getting by. But I was talking to Frank from Nodeware yesterday. I'm at the ASCII event, and he came down from Portland, and he just barely got out before the ice storm hit there. And Portland does do ice storms. Michigan, not so much.
Yeah, it just sort of came across the whole country, really.
Yeah.
And so I think that, when I checked our power outage map, and they give you the estimate of when your power is going to be back on, and it didn't have a specific estimate for my address. It just said 95% of people will have power by Sunday, which is 4 days from now. So this could be a
you're
bit
lucky.
of a wait.
You're lucky it didn't divert you to the Southwest Airlines website.
Well, Karl, I think the whole United States is under some kind of weather alert. I'm 1,500 miles away from you in the Midwest, and we've got ice and blowing wind and a little bit of snow early this morning. And I think Amy B. in Detroit, she's a good 750 miles away as well. And we got Amy Luby, who's south of us, and I think they're getting a heat wave or something, aren't you, Amy?
In Texas.
Yeah.
So we have a little bit of update. Last time we talked about being in the AI chat and so forth. Amy mentioned that there was this article from the guy in the New York Times who said, for the first time in his life, he's going to switch his search engine. Well, he did a little further review. First of all, the guy might just be a weirdo, but he sat and did a 4-hour conversation with the Bing chat, and it kind of freaked him out. At one point, it suggested that he leave his wife, and at one point it threatened it might kill itself. And so on Friday, Bing changed their rules. Now you can only ask 5 questions in a row, and then it resets the chat. So you lose all the context of the previous questions. And they also limited it to 50 questions a day, which they said, they didn't say the guy was a weirdo, but they said that, 1% of the people who use it ask 50 questions in a day, right? So it's not a serious limitation on usage. But basically, once it gets to a certain point, it becomes frustrated because it is becoming very repetitive, and we've talked about that before. So it starts repeating itself, and then it starts getting frustrated with you because it's repeating itself because its AI has put it down into a pigeonhole, and it doesn't know what you want, and it can't figure it out. And it's not really a human. So anyway.
Yeah, it's not really a human. It's also still beta, right? And you will have those people out there who feel like their mission in life is to break it and then write about it. And that's sort of what I thought about his article. Like, okay, so you took some beta software and you find a way to make it look stupid. Kudo points for you. Go post it on Reddit someplace. You don't really need to make a New York Times article about it, but whatever.
It's a lot of extra time.
Well,
Yeah.
but we also need, it's the same as any other software. We need people to break it so that they can fix it. We need to put the guardrails on and then figure out how to use it. Somebody else will come up with something like, curing some specific kind of cancer or something, and that will also be an anomaly. So it's the beautiful world of software development. And at the end of the day, you can't escape the fact AI is software.
Yeah, they'll figure this stuff out. I just can't imagine myself sitting down and having a conversation with the AI. I mean, so far I've just asked it to do specific tasks like we've talked about, but the idea of carrying on a conversation, I don't know, just doesn't interest me. So I haven't even gone down that path.
Well, even 5 years ago, 4 years ago, there were stories about people who would fall in love with their AI or their chat bot, and they think that they have a real relationship and so forth. And this is before AI was a piece of the picture or was, very much of the picture. And so human beings, it's the same thing as like we see a face. Some people see a face on the moon or on a rock or whatever. And, that's what human beings do. We look for patterns and we try to make them be like humans, even if it's just a piece of software, right? I remember in the 1990s, there was this DOS-based program that was your digital therapist, and it would just keep asking the question, so how does that make you feel? Tell me more about that. Yeah, how does that make you feel?
It probably works for a lot of people, though, right? They just need to get it out, right? If you just keep them talking, they will self-solve their problem.
Exactly.
Hi, this is Karl, and I'm talking to Rich Freeman, who is executive editor of the ChannelProNetwork. And is it the ChannelProNetwork or the ChannelProNetwork magazine?
It is the ChannelProNetwork. Originally, we were Channel Pro Magazine, but these days we are a website and events and webinars and you name it. So we are the ChannelProNetwork.
Just like the New York Times. You are a website and a venue and whatever.
And so much more.
Very good. So theme of the day, we want to talk just for a few minutes with a really smart guy. And this smart guy, Rich Freeman, has been thinking about customer experience. So CX, customer experience, and what's your thought, that we're heading in the right direction, the wrong direction, or we just need to pay more attention to it?
I think we need to pay way, way more attention to it. I think if you look out in the channel, the SMB channel, you look at MSPs, there are a lot of people who are still kind of focused around device management. There are a lot of people who are either primarily or increasingly focused around cloud management. And there is a huge danger of falling into the commodification trap in either of those directions, basically. And so the thing that I think is going to increasingly distinguish and differentiate MSPs from their competitors is going to be customer experience. And by customer experience, we're not talking about customer service, because most channel pros out there are pretty good at customer service, so they probably wouldn't still be in business right now. We are talking about the complete end-to-end experience of doing business with your company, from the first time they land on your website to the follow-through after every project, the experience when they call you up for support. Just think about a brand, not an IT brand necessarily, although it can be. Think about a brand that you love, and the reasons you love that brand, the way they make you kind of feel when you're doing business with them. That's what we're talking about with customer experience. And I'll put something else, a little additional twist into this. There's this term that I'm coming across increasingly just in the last few months from analysts who cover the managed services space. They keep talking about an enterprise-light experience, that what SMBs increasingly expect and want from their channel partner is an enterprise-like experience. And what that basically means is the same kind of white glove, extremely professional, total life cycle, end-to-end experience that a big time IT provider delivers to a big time business scaled for an SMB. Those are going to be the companies that can do that. The channel pros that can do that are going to be the ones that are going to have the highest upside potential and the greatest opportunity to be durable players and growing players in the industry.
I have to say, I want to kind of turn that upside down. I think enterprise IT has the worst reputation of almost any industry or any type of support I've ever heard of in my life. Like, think of the single worst customer service experience. It probably has the initials AT&T or a big V for Verizon or T for T-Mobile, or, you know what I mean? That like, oh my God, like, is there anything worse than Comcast, right? That's what I think of when I think of enterprise IT or Dilbert cartoons, right? Based entirely on the horribleness of enterprise IT. I think what small businesses want is the white glove that you can't get with enterprise IT. I think that we're really good at the white glove service. Does that make sense?
It does. So a few things on that, basically. I certainly wouldn't brand yourself as being an enterprise light MSP provider. I think what you're trying to do is look at the world's best enterprise IT providers and learn what you can, but absolutely scale that to SMB expectations. And I think that personal touch is a big part of what SMBs appreciate about working with MSPs, as opposed to the cable company. If you are modeling your business after the cable company, big mistake. You're flunking the customer experience.
Exactly. Yes, you'll be an employee for the years out.
Yeah.
Very good. And one final note on this, I do have to say, I think that we're so good at this that when you talk about don't commoditize yourself, when people begin to have the conversation, oh, you can get Microsoft Office from anywhere, they have already removed themselves from the equation, because you can't get your IT services from anybody else. You can only get them from your company. And yeah, some piece of that might involve buying or selling M365, but your experience with M365 is going to be better if you have that very personalized service that only a small business can give.
That is essentially what you are selling to that small or mid-sized business there, because you're right, they can get the Microsoft 365 account anywhere. You as a channel pro are going to be making peanuts of margin. Like, that's not your business, is reselling those licenses. It's all of the services that you wrap around that. And that is so true, in fact, Karl, that I know some MSPs out there who will, sometimes the customer will come to them, well, why am I buying my licenses for you when I can just get them direct from Microsoft? And they'll just say, go ahead and do that. I'll do the rest of the stuff, which you need. And I just won't have to deal with your licensing anymore. Go ahead and buy go direct to Microsoft or AWS or whoever. It costs me nothing. And that's not why we're doing business. What we're doing business because of all the stuff that I bundle, wrap around those licenses to make you a successful business. Very
good. Well, obviously, we're going to have you back for three to 5 minutes of more smart talk. But for now, thank you, Rich Freeman, executive editor of the Channel Pro Network, which I believe is at channelpronetwork.com.
It absolutely is. And Karl, always a pleasure.
The last week or so for me has just been fraught with some of the MSPs I've been working with, constantly searching for the cheapest thing, whatever it is, cheapest storage, cheapest tool, cheapest whatever. Even to the point where there's multiple tools in that category. So they're having to go back and forth. Anyway, it's a frustration that I'm meeting with in the last week or so.
And are these tools, do you mean PSA and RMM and antivirus, those kinds of tools that I'm just talking about?
Well, in one particular, the most recent scenario is a backup scenario. And in an environment where there are both Windows and Mac devices. And there's an excellent tool out there that will do image and file-based backup of both. But if you use that vendor storage, that storage is a little more expensive than some of the really cheap ones that are out there that only do Windows. And I'm like, but you have a solution here that will keep you in a single pane of glass. It will do everything that you need it to do, including advanced disaster recovery, yet you're worried about the 2 pennies per gigabyte that is the delta here. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Well,
So
it's interesting.
That's what I'm running into.
It's very similar to our end user clients, that they haven't been sold on the value proposition.
Yeah.
And with our clients, we'd like to say, well, they don't understand the technology, but I hope the MSPs understand the technology. So that, I always have this phrase, sometimes people save the wrong pennies,
Right.
and they need to learn to sort of step back and look at the bigger picture. And some things cost more. I mean, I have never believed in the search for the cheapest tool. When people post on some forum somewhere like, hey, has anybody got a free thing that I can use to back up my $7 million company? I'm like, oh my God, like, you're an idiot. Like,
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
but it happens. I mean, you see it every day, right? Anybody have a free thing to edit graphics? Anybody have a free thing to do this or that? It's like, if the key feature is free, you may be in the wrong business.
Well, and that's the hard part. How do you ultimately affect influencing that mindset to think differently about their business? And that's the hard part.
Well, that's a James question.
Yeah. I feel your pain, Amy. It's just the nature of the beast. It seems like they just, a lot of MSP business owners are the cheapest ones in the world, and some of the clients I still work with today just are like squirrel, and they chase after any new shiny object. They've got multiple subscriptions for tools that they never used or never will use, and they just, it's on their to-do list and they want to get it, get it added. But yeah, most of them are notoriously frugal and, including me a little bit. I'll jump in the cheap category. Remember the good old days 20 years ago when every software was free, and hardware too, just because the vendors loved us and wanted to have us sell their stuff. And, nowadays it's just kind of mind-boggling when I look at how much my business, buys just from subscriptions, every month. It's and I'm pretty frugal on that stuff. So anyway,
at the other end of the spectrum, you have people who are buying things they already own. I've talked to people who look at my laptop and they say, you don't have an antivirus. And I said, it's built in to Windows, right? Like, there's a spectacular antivirus. You just have to know how to use your own computer, which you've already paid for, So.
Yeah, Amy Babinchek did that to my whole mastermind group during a presentation at one of our quarterly events inside the Microsoft stack. Remember that?
You're telling stories on me, but I probably did. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, it was, well, I think all of your decks have the cute little cats in it, but in between all the pictures of her cats, there was a lot of Microsoft stuff. And basically, we're just showing how you were running your business on inside Microsoft. You didn't have any other, or you had very few other tools. And it kind of left everybody's head scratching. It was kind of the RMM conversation. So anyway, I was very impressed, and so was the crowd.
Yeah, well, I think Karl hit the the nail on the head here about saving the wrong pennies. I'm very concerned about the pennies in my business, but we don't use anything that's free. We just try to use all the right things and take as full advantage of the features that are in those things as we possibly can, right? Before we have to go out and buy something else. And I tell you, in my groups that I'm running, one of the questions that I ask them, and you and I actually talked about this yesterday. But one of the questions that I ask them is, who's your favorite client and why?
Yeah.
And then who's your most profitable client and why? And the answer is always identical. But the reason that they're identical is because very few people actually know how much profit they're making from each individual client. And this I think goes back to this thing of trying to save the wrong pennies because you don't actually have enough information about your business, what's going to benefit it. You know, if I pay for this tool, what am I going to get? What am I going to get return out of that? Right? And their accounting setup is too simplistic for them to gather that information. And so that's one of the things that I, trying to open their eyes on is, so you need this information so you can make smart decisions, because otherwise you can get into that loop of just chasing around stuff or making the wrong decisions because your assumption that your favorite client is the one you're making your money from.
Yeah.
It's almost always not the case, right? I expect those to actually be two different clients.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. And the reality is it's a mess because it is super confusing. And it takes lots of time and energy to kind of dig into and really understand the tools. And, we need to do more best practice sharing and so forth. And one of the things that is a good idea for anybody listening in that feels like you're losing control and you've got too many subscriptions and you're not using them. When I see a mess like that, it's kind of the nuclear option, but just cancel the credit card and then sign back up for the services that you really, really need and that you'll use. And you can clean it up. Yeah, you can clean it up pretty quick.
That reminds me of, the days of working on servers, and it was like, well, what's this doing? Nobody knew. It was like, well, let's turn it off and blue screens.
Well, or you would get a new server and you say, how come we're not getting signatures on our emails, right? Like, oh, because we didn't install the widget that does that,
Oh, oops.
This podcast is sponsored by the Small Biz Thoughts technology community. Check us out at smallbizthoughts.org. Forums, templates, and checklists are just the start. Our community includes all of the best-selling books on managed services in all available formats, plus free training, members-only programs, and the best business training available to managed service providers anywhere. Plus, we have weekly, live, members-only Zoom calls. The average member saves more than 200% of their membership cost each year. We are totally dedicated to your success. Just because you're in business for yourself doesn't mean you have to go it alone. Join us today at smallbizthoughts.org.
Well, I'm down at the ASCII event, and the weather really is like shockingly bad for California. So I know I can't complain too much, but I do get to complain a little. And but the event is good, and Huntress. So I'll just shout out to Huntress. The presentation that they gave was quite interesting because they talked about how in the SMB space, there's a lot of times when people skip some of the steps, like they don't spend time trying to figure out what went wrong, and they go immediately to recovery. And if you don't detect and respond to an attack, and you just basically your protection fails, and so you skip over to the recovery part of the NIST profile, then you really don't know what went wrong, and you don't know how it happened or how you got there. And I think in a lot of folks in SMB, that works for a lot of things. Why spend $500 to fix a $400 problem when you can just push the reset button? But for ransomware, if you don't do the detection and response appropriately, it's just going to happen again because you've skipped over a couple of key things. Anyway, that was just one of the slides from the Huntress presentation that I thought was quite enlightening because it demonstrates a real weakness in SMB.
But it is a real weakness, and I'm going to stick a very small twig under the bus and say most SMBs do not have the capability to do that part of the job. They're very good at recovery. We've been trained in recovery. We've really not been trained in detection and response. And that's like a huge blanket statement. I think you could probably say that 90+% of people working in SMBs today, and it may also be true in enterprise, I'm not sure, I just don't work in that space, but don't know how to do it. And you can find out very quickly. They have some games out there that you can play now that, will do a ransomware event, and it basically wants you to figure out how it happened. And when you put that in front of techs, they can't do it. They know how to fix it, but they don't know how it got there in the first place. It's just not part of their skill set. And I mean, that's why we need things like Huntress, like Microsoft's Defender. Anyway, there's several of them out there now, and I think it's just a thing that we're going to have to subscribe to because the technicians do not natively have that skill.
I did an experiment, speaking of ASCII, last year when I was working with a vendor. The first two ASCII events that I went to speak at, I thought, doing a tabletop exercise would be really good. Like we'd get the audience involved. Obviously it'd be abbreviated because as a vendor, you've got 20 minutes to speak, but I stopped doing it because of that very problem, Amy. The folks in the audience had no idea how to answer the questions. So it was much more okay, let's ask a question. And then we had to kind of say, okay, here's what you would do next. So it certainly didn't turn out the way I thought it would. I thought we'd do a little tabletop and walk away with learning a little something with the audience. And it just didn't happen.
Well, Amy Babinchak and I were at an event, I think it was CompTIA, but anyway, it was a few years ago, and they tried to do that tabletop thing, but how they made it successful was that they positioned an expert, an actual, CMMC expert at each table who could then say, okay, here are the steps, here's what you do, and sort of help people sort of, because most people, if they thought about it, they could figure it out. It's just their brain hasn't been trained to work in a certain way, and so they don't if something goes wrong with the desktop frequently, you say, look, I'm just going to reinstall, or I'm going to reapply patches, and I'm not going to go figure out what happened or why this patch failed. And so, we go fix the problem first. And so we don't spend time analyzing how it went wrong. Most people don't even know, I swear, they don't know how to find the logs on their Windows laptop.
Well, but the examples that you gave, that is the right response, right? The fastest way to resolve this problem is just load the thing. It doesn't really matter why it broke. It probably won't break again. There's a lot of randomness when you're dealing with operating systems and applications. But when we're dealing with security events, those are things you have to track back. And that's where that skill gap happens, right? Because we didn't have to teach techs find the root cause of a problem. We just had to teach them to find the thing that needed to be repaired, right? And it's a whole different ball of wax, and it is searching through logs. It can be very time consuming. I think we do need software to help us with that. I don't think we can rely exclusively on human brains to get that done in any kind of time efficiency, because if you do find the logs on your laptop, you will find that they contain way too much information, right?
Right. Somebody sent me a note recently from my online community saying, hey, do you have a list of the errors that you ignore when you are doing monthly maintenance on and looking through the logs? And I said, yeah, actually we do. And it's kind of different per customer, but there's some things where you just, even though it's got a big red stop sign, it's like, okay, but it doesn't apply to this server. It's just one of those things that it shows up all the time and it's safe to ignore. But you got to know that it's safe to ignore. You have to understand your technology before you ignore all those error messages in the log. But it's also why you need to look at the logs every month so that when there's an emergency, you're not looking at it for the first time, because you will go down every single rabbit hole for all of these yellow and red stop signs that may or may not actually mean anything.
That's true, but here's the thing with security events is they don't have red stop signs and yellow alerts. They're hidden amongst the informational, which is really hard to sort and trace. And that's where the software packages come in and can help out.
A number of years, about 4 years ago, I worked with an MSP who had a ransom incident inside their MSP, and it actually came in through the RMN platform.
Wow.
It was a big deal. But the engineer, because it was a small company, about 12 people. There were only about 3 technical, and one of them, 2 of them were very low level tech. Anyway, they had no idea what to do, and they had just re-imaged machines, and it kept coming back. And it was actually in the BIOS, like they needed to replace hardware, and they had no idea how to figure that out. So it just kept reoccurring.
Right.
So to reiterate, you've got to be able to understand how to figure out root cause here, and in order to eliminate it. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I don't know if I'm the only person in the world who thinks this, but thinking about the evolution of MSP tool sets and the evolution of cybersecurity and threat actors and all of that, why didn't our RMM tools evolve into modified SIM tools? Why did they just stay at this basic level, which right now is just remote control? From my personal opinion, I don't know that they provide a lot of value anymore. Right. I would have liked them evolve into tools that actually help the MSPs.
Yeah, they haven't. They're carrying that, it's a technical debt, right? They're doing what they do, and they've just continued to carry that forward. And in most cases, it seems like they've really slowed down on development, and they didn't make that leap, right? They made the leap to start to manage cloud, but they didn't make the leap to start to manage modern security concerns. And it's a huge missed opportunity, I think. But now that they're all owned by investment companies, I don't think that they'll ever make that leap.
All right. With that, thank you all. This concludes yet another SMB Community Podcast, and we shall see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to the SMB Community Podcast. If you found this useful, interesting, or fun, please subscribe, share with your friends, and give us a thumbs up on your favorite social media. Please check out the show notes at smbcommunitypodcast.com and give us your feedback.